wondered what it's like to work in the tech industry as a neurodivergent person? If so, stay with us on the Just Be Better podcast, where we explore endless possibilities of professional growth, learning, and excellence. Today we have Peter Harrison, a neurodivergent technical operations leader who brings a unique perspective to problem solving and team leadership. Welcome, Peter. I am very thrilled to have you here. To start, could you go ahead and introduce yourself a little bit?
Thanks for having me. I'm Peter Harrison. I am a technical support operations leader. I have just around 10 years of experience in the tech industry, and I'm also a neurodivergent professional diagnosed with ADHD and autism, which has drastically shaped my career journey in a lot of unique ways. And this diagnosis came very late in life. And so this wasn't something that I knew going through my career, but it has definitely shaped my career and been something that I've now realized has been a really important part of how I've approached problems, how I've solved problems, how I've built relationships, how I've navigated my career from where I started in the beginning to where I am today.
So what initially attracted you to the field of technical operations?
I initially got started in tech mostly because it was a job that I could sit down and do. I had spent most of my career up to that point working in retail or restaurants, and most of my roles were very physical in nature. And I had an opportunity to work in a customer service role where I was working Monday through Friday, 8 to 4, 8 to 5, and I was able to do it sitting down and leverage these skills that I knew I had, but when I was working in retail, they didn't really have a lot of interest. And so these skills were my ability to communicate really complex things, my ability to relate to people in very unique and innate ways, and also talk to very upset people and customers and kind of speak their language and calm them down and help them solve a problem that what seemed like up to that point a lot of other people had difficulty solving. The first role I had was in a startup in downtown Austin for an e-commerce company that focused primarily on bands and like musicians selling their merchandise and tickets and things like that. And so came on when they were in a really difficult customer service situation, but there were a lot of other things that they needed done from an operations standpoint. There were technical documentation that needed to be written. There were processes that hadn't been defined. There were a lot of things that just hadn't really been ironed out because they were new and they were young. And so I had an opportunity to really leverage my analytical skills and insight and ability to kind of see the things and the patterns and connections that other people didn't really see or weren't able to make those connections. And I really enjoyed it. Absolutely fell in love with kind of this opportunity to use this part of my brain that I love to use. And so that's where I got started. And from there, I went on to working for Apple. And I worked at their corporate office in Austin, Texas, and started working in their developer support area. Spent most of my time in the app review department, working with developers, helping them understand the really difficult nature of why their app was rejected and helping them be kind of okay with what was going on and then understand kind of their next steps, which if anybody's ever had to go through the app rejection or app review process, it's very complex, it's very complicated. The guidelines change kind of on a whim sometimes. And so helping developers understand that, developers speak their own language in and of themselves. And so having the ability to communicate with developers in a way that they understand while also communicating with them in a way that lets them know exactly what they need to be doing or at least the policies and procedures they need to be abiding by was a very difficult and kind of gray task to do on a consistent basis. And that was something I did exceedingly well and became senior advisor, a tier 2 person that was tasks were escalated to and was running projects and things of that nature while I was at Apple. And And so it sparked a lot of my intrigue while working at Apple because I started to see this large company that had a lot of things ironed out, but I started to see, the gaps in certain areas where efficiencies could be made and efficiencies could be improved. And so finding different ways to tighten the bolts on the system and figuring out how to get those things done is probably the hardest thing to figure out, I guess, in any company at that stage. Mostly because there's a difference between knowing what needs to be done, knowing that it needs to be made more efficient, and then actually getting, the green light to having it be done or be approved. And so that was something that was really difficult to get accomplished and get approved oftentimes, because you're having to get approval from all these different lines of businesses and leadership and overhead and all of these different avenues. And it was such a eye-opening system to understand, while also looking at the situation and realizing that, like, there's these developers or customers that are in a sense kind of suffering because, like, you're seeing how the system is also not serving them. And so there were a lot of things that were really difficult to reconcile when you're in that space as someone who's on the front line, but also looking at the behind the scenes, trying to improve the operational efficiency of not only how we serve the customers, how we serve developers, but also how your team works, how your team functions and operates. And so it's a lot of things that I learned and gained while I was at Apple that then moved me on to where I currently am at Zapier, where a lot of what we do is automation. And so figuring out ways to optimize workflows, optimize processes, seems to be as efficient as possible, as collaborative, and as streamlined as possible to help the teams collaborate better, but also serve the customers and improve the product, were things that always in motion and always being talked about. And so it's been a really fascinating journey to get to this space.
Your current title is Support Team Lead and Senior Technical Support Specialist. If I say to probably majority of people that I'm speaking with a support specialist, all they can think of is someone who answers the phone when they don't know how to open their laptop or when something doesn't work. Can you clarify and tell people what your role actually entails and what you do and why this role is exciting to be in?
Yeah, so the technical support specialist role at Zapier is incredibly unique. It is different than, I would say, different than any other support specialist role at any other company, because it doesn't just require a knowledge of the platform or a knowledge of Zapier and Zapier's products. When customers write in or chat in and ask, how do I do this on Zapier? How do I build a workflow between these two platforms? How do I can't connect this or that, or this isn't working. Our job doesn't stop at just what happens inside of the Zap on the Zapier platform. We go far beyond into the workflow to understand the platforms that they're using inside of that workflow. For instance, if they're trying to build a workflow between Google Sheets and Monday, then if there's something going on where it's not happening, where something isn't triggering or something isn't ending up in one place or another, or the wrong information's ending up somewhere, or they can't figure out how to get the information, we dive into the API documentation for Monday.com. We dive into the API documentation for Google Sheets, or for whichever app or service they're using inside of that workflow, to help them troubleshoot why the workflow isn't operating at its highest level. So our knowledge doesn't just stop at Zapier, it extends to the workflows and the apps and services that our customers are using. So we're not just knowledgeable about Zapier, we're knowledgeable about the tools, services, and et cetera that our customers are using, because we kind of have to be. We have to know a little bit about every other tool that is being used, because it's going to be used on our platform. It's going to be used in order to do these things. And so we have to be willing to have that kind of desire to investigate, that really like curious mindset to be like, really wonder why this isn't working. I really wonder, kind of what makes this workflow tick, because this is about building these automation workflows that are business critical for this customer, for what they want to do in the end result. And so it's such a unique support specialist like tech role, because our It's not just clear your cache and cookies and turn it off and turn it back on. And we do that, mind you. We definitely have those conversations. And we have conversations where we are deeply involved in helping customers completely operationalize their workflows, completely do these like workflow style project management type conversations where we are, in a sense, like technical program managers with customers and helping them assess their workflow needs, how much they can really do with this specific workflow, and if they need more, like if they need to build out multiple workflows, or can they build this all into one? And so there's a lot of asset management and a lot of risk management and understanding, how things collide and interact.
From what you're saying, it sounds a little bit more than just telling people to restart their laptop and start again.
Just a little bit, yeah.
Just a little bit. And you mentioned that you are navigating your career as neurodivergent professional. What are some of the key challenges you faced in your career?
I've struggled with traditional workplace expectations and communication styles. I've struggled with dealing with a unique style of burnout. There's a different level of burnout. It affects neurodivergent people differently than the neurotypical people. It's still a type of burnout. It still can happen as a result of taking on too much, but it affects neurodivergent people differently. And the challenges that I've faced with burnout have been very difficult, mostly around trying to manage how to determine when I'm close to that phase and how to pace myself to stay within a healthy range of managing my energy and managing what my kind of self-care needs are in that time. The traditional workplace expectations and the communication styles are an ever-present thing. They're the things that I think are probably the hardest ones to specify on an individual basis, because while there's some pretty standardized workplace expectations and maybe standardized communication styles, every single person that you deal with inside of a workplace has their own kind of expectation of either how somebody should perform or how somebody should behave or how somebody should communicate. And especially when you're engaging with a superior, those types of expectations are often relayed in an implicit way. And when it comes to workplace expectations, the difficult thing for me as a neurodivergent professional is that the best way to tell me what your expectations are to be very explicit and specific in those expectations. Otherwise, I'm going to miss them. And also understanding that my communication style is very literal. And so if somebody uses a lot of euphemisms or uses a lot of like turns of phrase or things like that, then I have spent a lot of years masking and camouflaging my autistic traits so that I can appear as if I understand or make it seem like I'm right there with them. But in reality, I don't fully understand or grasp what's been said, and I'm not absorbing it in a way that person might think I am. And so I haven't fully understood the expectation, at least not in the way that they hoped that I would or thought that I did. And what's more effective is to lay out that expectation or communicate those things very explicitly and in no uncertain terms. And that's what's so, I think, difficult now, is that because I've camouflaged my autistic traits for so long, I got really good at acting like I wasn't neurodivergent and pretending like I was neurotypical when you kind of turn off that feature of yourself. And it's like, no, this is how I naturally communicate. This is how I naturally am. It's really shocking for the other party because they're like, but wait, like I didn't have to communicate like this before. Why do I have to communicate like this now? There's a bit of a culture shock in that, like trying to like understanding and coming to terms with like they have to really be that literal and they have to really be that explicit. And it almost seems like there's a struggle to believe that someone would need that level of specificity. That like, can't you just know what I mean? Because the workplace cultures and expectations that have been built and reinforced for so long, and that being explicit is only valuable in certain situations and is only needed or required or expected in certain situations. But otherwise, the implicit communication is more strategic, is more skilled because it requires less work, less words, and less time.
When you realize that you're not a neurotypical yourself, I would assume, and correct me if I'm wrong, that approaching your managers and actually trying to explain to them that, sorry, I need more clarification when you were masking your traits for so long was quite a challenging challenging task for yourself personally. What was that aha moment for you as like, oh, this is what I need from you and I need to communicate that to you, otherwise we're not going to get on the same page?
I found out that I had ADHD when I was working at Apple. I never made an official request for accommodation related to my ADHD because I took it upon myself as like, I need to figure out how to compensate for my differences, which is a very common reaction. And a lot of that fear comes from like, if I tell somebody that I need an accommodation, that there's going to be a negative perception and reaction about the fact that I need an accommodation or that I need something else to do my job because I before didn't, but now I do. And so when I was in Apple, I didn't say anything. And it wasn't until I got to Zapier that I was much more open about it. And I think it was the first meeting I had with my manager. I was like, I have ADHD. It plays this role and this function when I'm at work. And this is how I operate. And this is how I communicate. And this is the best way for me to communicate about things going forward. This is like, if we want to, communicate about things, like this is the best way to do it because this is what is going to make sure that I'm attentive to the issues that need to be attended to, that I'm keeping track of the things that I need to keep track of. And so I positioned the communication around what I need based on how it benefited their needs and what would eventually what would necessarily in the end result benefit them. Because oftentimes what ends up being perceived is that I'm asking for these accommodations or these adjustment in communication style, etc., simply because I just need you to change the way that you're communicating to me because this is what I need. End of story, end of sentence. But if I phrase it in a way that I show them how it benefits them, then they're more likely to get on board and have buy-in. It's something that I learned how to do as a result of trying to get buy-in for other things that I wanted to, for projects and other things that I wanted to do. Like with that framework, I was a lot more successful than a lot of other people have been or that I've heard of other people being. I approached it from a very collaborative, even playing field type emotional standpoint, while they are required to provide a reasonable accommodation and accommodate the things that my ADHD, my neurodivergent differences and things like that, I can still approach it in a way that maybe makes them feel a little bit less like I'm putting it out as a list of demands and more of a like, hey, let's collaborate on working styles. And they were very receptive to that.
I think what you just said, it sounds quite amazing that you took something that society might perceive as weaknesses and you just went and showcased them that it's actually not a weakness, it's actually a strength. We just need to work out how to make it a strength for everyone, which I think is such a nice view on everything for both neurodivergent and neurotypical people to show that I have something different, but that can be very beneficial to everyone.
Yeah.
Can you share some examples maybe of how your ADHD and autism have helped you drive innovation and problem solving in your work?
So one of my key strengths is my ability to see patterns and connections that others might miss. And so this has allowed me to optimize processes and implement data-driven strategies that have significantly improved productivity and customer satisfaction. So, for example, I first became a team lead in December of 2022, and I started leading my team. One of the things that I noticed was each person came to our one-on-ones in a very similar way. They would come either partially prepared or with just one piece of information, but it was the quality of our discussions was lacking, and the discussions were still heavily based on what I as the team lead brought to the table or what I as the team lead brought to the meeting. The whole point of the one-on-ones was it was their time. It was their space. It was a place for them to improve, a place for them to grow and do things. And so I noticed that concurrently with this pattern with our one-on-ones, our CSAT scores were a little bit down and our productivity numbers were a little bit down. And so I launched an initiative within my team to improve the accountability and ownership of the one-on-ones and the team meetings. And so the way that I did this was by combining both of my ability to see these patterns, my analytical mindset around being able to analyze our data and connect that to empathize and understand where my teammates were coming from and my direct reports and understand what they were feeling, and also understand that they needed to know the why behind the numbers. They needed to know the why behind all of these things. And they also needed to know my commitment. They also needed to know what I was accountable to. to. And so the multifaceted kind of aspect of this initiative took about 6 weeks in total. And it started very slowly with me just giving them one kind of short assignment of like, I want you to think about this one question. What do you want out of this meeting? What do you want to get? And that's all I want you to think about. I want you to come to the meeting with an answer. And I did that for the first week. And then the next week, I asked them to come with, a specific ticket. And then the next week, I started encouraging them to do the same things that we were doing in our one-on-ones in our team meetings. In addition to these small little acts of like ownership in the one-on-ones in the team meetings, I paired them with embedding our conversation in the one-on-ones with helping them understand and connect the dots between what they were doing on their daily basis with why it was important, what it was impacting, and also understanding their own why of like why they wanted to show up every day and why they wanted to do what they wanted to do and where they wanted to get to eventually, whether that be at Zapier, whether that be in support, whether that be somewhere else. And so all of these things together helped them to gain a deeper sense of ownership and accountability of their role, of the team, of the company. And as a result, not only did they have that deeper sense of ownership and accountability with the team and company, the CSAT scores improved by 11% within the first 4 weeks, and their productivity improved by 20%. The progress that this approach made just by being able to see like there's a pattern here. There's a pattern of their heavy reliance on me to be the owner of these one-on-ones, the owner of this team meeting, the owner of these things. And it's like, these are your things. This is your team. This is your one-on-one. I want to see what you do with it. I want to see what you can do with it, what you want to do with it. And, if you don't want to do anything with it, let's talk about that. Let's talk about why you don't want to do that. And so allowing them the space while also talking about the whys and still moving them towards the end goals and holding them accountable to that was something that had huge impacts and improved how they related to our customers, how they worked with our customers, and also how productive they were on a daily basis. It was one of the things that I think was a huge example of how the different way that I look at things and situations and people and relationships, because I'm neurodivergent, helps me to get something more out of a team and accomplish something more in a shorter amount of time.
That's very, very impressive. To increase productivity of your team by a fifth, that's quite a massive number. So very well done you. Talking about leadership in general, obviously when you're a team lead, you have a lot of different people within your team. How, as a leader and as a manager, do you manage to embrace the differences within your team? And how do you encourage people to work together with those differences?
I think a lot of this starts with leading by example. I mean, the tone and the pace you set as a leader in that respect is huge. Your ability to model this behavior inside of your team is paramount, and your ability to model this behavior outside of your team is really huge. And so that being able to be a lighthouse, if you will, for your team to understand and see like that you are engaging with people of very diverse people of diverse perspectives, mindsets, approaches, and engaging with them in an open concept and an open mind while also being respectful of their points and perspectives. Doing that openly while also bringing that into the team dynamic in a way that encourages each person to bring their own sense of identity and self to the forefront. And I think that part of that comes from how well you're able to engage with your directs in the one-on-one conversations that you have with them. And the other part of it comes from how well you're able to manage the team meetings and the talking time in those team meetings. It's really easy to kind of lean on certain people who really enjoy talking in team meetings. As a manager, you're doing a lot. There's a lot of things. There's a lot of plates that are spinning. There's a lot of tasks that you have going on. And so if there's somebody who really loves talking in your team and they're happy to take the torch for an hour, it's really easy to lean on that. However, the danger with that is that the people who have something to say or might have something to say or something to share are less likely to speak up because there's a larger personality that's taking up all of the space. For a long time, I was that personality. And it was really hard to to learn how to dial it back and hold the space in the room for other people and be okay with the kind of discomfort of silence and being okay with just kind of like sitting there and waiting for people to work up their own personal courage to say something and speak out and kind of get comfortable with the room. That being okay with speaking directly to people in a team setting, finding different ways to engage with your team. These are all things that are really important and valuable. One of the things that I do really often is I have a very specific icebreaker question that I use. And it
Give the secret away. What was the question?
I really don't know how I came up with it. It popped into my head one day, but it's, if you could be any kind of vegetable, what would you be and why? And there's nothing like really unique about this question in the sense that it's anything magical. It's actually more about the follow-up. When somebody answers this question, I ask follow-up questions. I get really curious about their answer and I follow up with them on their answer while we're sitting there talking. So when they answer the question, I'm like, oh, really? So why is that? Or what's this? Or what about that? Not in a pestering kind of way, but very curious, very interested and intrigued and I want to know what kind of vegetable you are. And so intrigued by who they are and what kind of vegetable they think they would be. And then so satisfied with their answer, no matter what it is, and taking them at their word. And it's something that I've tried it in so many different groups across all different types of people. It has an amazing effect. It absolutely opens up the room. People start talking. People start asking each other the question. And new people come into the room and they're like, what kind of vegetable are you? And it's been really fascinating. I think that something about it helps people to kind of separate a little bit from this very internalized view of themselves and think about something maybe just a little bit silly, like what kind of vegetable would I be? And also maybe what gets me about the question and what I think is really funny about the question is that a vegetable is a culinary term. There's no such thing as an actual vegetable. And I just think that that's hilarious. So if you could be a vegetable, well, vegetables don't exist. And I just think that that's why the question's really funny, because when people are like, well, what's a vegetable? And I'm like, what is a vegetable? And that's a whole other question we could talk about. And so I that's why I love the question, because it opens up the room in a very unique way, and it helps people to relax and let their guard down a little bit, because it's about them, but it's not about them. It's about a vegetable. And they're like, does it have to be about me? It's a vegetable. What vegetable? Choose a vegetable, but tell me why.
I don't know why. All I could think of right now is a carrot. So I think my answer would have to be carrot. So
Yeah.
I don't even know why, but
yeah.
just the first thing that popped in my head.
I love it. Carrots are great. Carrots are great. I don't think I've ever heard of somebody choosing a carrot yet. So you'd be the first
really?
carrot. Yeah, you'd be the first carrot.
Good.
So.
The bright and orange one. A little bit more on a personal side than Peter. How do you personally handle failures or setbacks? Obviously, in work environment, you can't escape them and they come running at one point or another. How do you deal with and what is the key to bouncing back?
In the past, I did not handle failures well. I remember the first time I interviewed for an internal role at Apple and I was rejected. I did not handle it well. I took it very personally. I think that what has helped me to deal with setbacks and failures is understanding that setbacks and failures and missed opportunities, and however you want to define them or label them or describe them, they're information about how you can still reach your goal. And so when I think about it in terms of if I have a goal of a career aspiration that I want to achieve, a role that I'm wanting to get to, or whether it's I want to be at this title or this role or this position, and I'm aiming for that, getting these opportunities to get there, but I'm not getting it, then the setbacks or the failures or the rejections are information that I can use. I have the opportunity to use to reach that goal. Do I always use it immediately? No. I think that there's something that we all have to do. I think that we should all do it because it's helpful to do it, is to sit in that emotion. There's a lot of advice to move very quickly from failures are opportunities and possibilities. And it's yeah, true. And you should also deal with the emotion of failure and sit in it and let yourself feel it at least long enough to find yourself in an okay place with it. Because if you repress that feeling, you're going to find yourself a very frustrated and resentful person towards whatever it was or whoever it was that rejected you or is the source of your failure. Oftentimes, I'll sit for at least a moment, maybe longer, but no longer than a day that's usually if it's like a really big thing, but I'll sit with whatever emotion it is and just be like, I need to at least feel it and let it kind of work its way through and then assess, okay, what can I use? What can I use from what I have missed, didn't get, didn't hit? What of this is usable, actionable that I can take, synthesize, and then move forward with? That's what failure setbacks really are. They're information about the accuracy of your approach. And you've approached things maybe not in the most accurate way, or maybe you did it perfectly and it's just not the right time. The door was closed, the opportunity was given to someone else or something along those lines, or they just don't like you. That happens. And that's one of the hardest things that I've had to come to terms with recently. It's like some people just don't like you and you have no control over that, no matter how much you want them to like you and no matter how much you like yourself. And that's okay. The best way to change or bounce back from that is like, well, go to somebody else, because somebody else will absolutely like you. Just don't go back to that person, because that person is not for you. That opportunity is not for you.
I completely agree with you on this. I think what I noticed when working with the different teams, when going through like evaluation processes or feedback processes, that a lot of people take constructive feedback or negative feedback or failures very, very personally, and they really criticize themselves. But when you give them a praise, they take that almost like, oh, that's not big enough. That's just part of my job, which I think is quite unfair and unequal, and you have to deal with that yourself. I can see we're running out of time already. I feel like I could talk with you for hours and hours, so we might get you back again. But just when you think on your personal growth and your progression, what does personal growth mean to you, and how do you measure success personally?
I was thinking about this the other day. Personal growth is kind of like going around a spiral staircase. You're experiencing the same similar events in life. You're going to see the same things, or you may see the same events or circumstances that you experienced when you were younger or previously in life as you go around this spiral staircase, up or down. But the key thing is that as you go up and down this spiral staircase, you yourself change. You grow and evolve as a person. And so each time you experience these events, instances, things that have gone on in your life, whether it be, a circumstance or an event or an interaction or conflict or a joyful event or whatnot, you yourself have changed. And so you experience that thing differently. And by extension, you learn and gain deeper understanding and awareness of yourself. So personal growth to me is kind of like that. It's never ending journey of discovery, and I think it's absolutely worth it. I think in terms of measuring it, I think it's probably one of the hardest things to measure. I would say that the more aligned you are with your authentic internal self is how I measure my personal growth. The more I feel like I'm acting from within my internal self, the more I feel like I have grown as a person and grown in my personal growth journey.
I really loved your staircase analogy, and your definition essentially is really lovely. And then if there's one myth about your profession, your career, neurodivergent people in career that you would like to debunk one and for all, what would that be?
I think a myth that would be worthwhile to debunk is that neurodivergent people are probably some of the most empathetic, analytical, intelligent, operationally minded people. I think there's a myth that someone who's neurodivergent is not able to fit in with standard way of working and operating inside of normal work styles. And I think that in my experience, that has not been the case. There's there's nothing that I haven't been able to do. And I know that every job, every role, every position that exists is a position that I can excel in. I may have to do it a little bit differently, but the outcome will be as high, if not a higher quality. So I think that's one of the myths out there that I would love to debunk.
I love this. And do you have any, I don't know if you're a reader, a podcast listener, a YouTube video watcher, course doer, whatever. Do you have any resource that significantly impacted or influenced your professional growth, career, or just in general perspective?
Yeah, so there's a book that I think about it earlier today. There's a book that I really enjoyed reading. It actually kind of inspired a energy action prioritization matrix that I built based on kind of my neurodivergent work style for managing my energy. And it's called 4,000 Weeks, Time Management for Mortals. It's by Oliver Burkeman. And it's quite literally one of the best books I've read in terms of reshaping perspective on productivity and time management. Plus, Ego is the Enemy by Ryan Holiday were two books that really helped to kind of solidify a lot of the personal and professional growth changes that I've made over the years.
Perfect. I'll tag them in the description box so people can have a look. I heard about Ego is the Enemy. I've never heard about 4,000 Weeks. So I'll definitely check that out.
It's a stellar book. I have really enjoyed the read, and Oliver Burkeman does a lot of other stuff as well. So
very, very last question. How can our listeners connect with you, follow you if they want to reach out, if they have questions? What's the best way for them to connect?
I'm active on LinkedIn. It's probably the best way to connect with me at the moment. Been posting on there almost every day, and so I have some content coming out as well. So yeah, I would say that find me on LinkedIn and reach out, connect. Feel free to message me. I also have a chat, like a booking link in my profile as well. So if anybody wants to schedule some time with me there, they're more than welcome to.
Perfect. I'll add everything in the description so people actually can reach out to you. But for now, thank you so much for your time being with me. It was an absolute pleasure meeting you and getting to know you. I feel like I know you quite well by now. Don't know why I got this feeling, but it was a very lovely conversation.
Likewise, definitely enjoyed it myself. So glad to have been here. Thank you for having me.